Hello, this is Jerry Morton. Welcome to my Finding My Way podcast. This is podcast number 7, titled Needles. Needles is a story from my childhood years. The collection of stories I have written and am reading to you cover many subcultures in our country that I have interacted with from childhood to my adult and senior years. A more extensive introduction to the Finding My Way stories takes place in the beginning of Podcast 1. Regardless of which podcast you are listening to, you will find the stories both entertaining and worthy of your reflective thoughts concerning its contents. The stories, as a collection, provide insights into a span of time that has played a role in shaping American culture and influencing its future. The stories provide you with a sense of admiration for the culture's collective courage, in our country's commitment to justice, and its optimistic willingness to address new challenges. Needles. It was a long line, even if you weren't about to turn 4. Mommy said they were going to give all the little children their immunization shots. The little children were going to get several shots at once because they couldn't get any of them until after the war. The shots were needed for the soldiers until the war was over, she said. The temperature was just right that late spring day in 1946. The sun was peeking around clouds every once in a while. That was a good thing because the line was really long outside the Granite City, Illinois high school gymnasium. There were lots and lots of little children like me holding their mothers' hands while waiting to get their shots. The line seemed to move slowly. "Now remember, honey, you're going to be brave. You don't have to be afraid," she kept repeating every so often. In the past, when I really got sick, they would give me a shot. They hurt. The longer the needle was, the more it hurt. They would stick the needle all the way in, up to the big part that had the medicine in it. The needle hurt when it first went in, and it hurt as they stuck it all the way in. When they squirted the medicine in, it really, really hurt. They stuck it in your bottom, which they always did with the really long needles. The medicine felt like a big ball of hurt inside where the needle was deepest. That hurt stayed a long time. I didn't like it. As my experience with the needles grew, I wanted the shots less and less. I would fuss and cry and hold back from the doctor's office. Mommy didn't like it when I did that. She would pull or carry me into the office no matter how much I protested. "You're not going to be afraid, darling. You're going to be a big boy, aren't you?" Being a big boy was what I wanted to be. Yes, of course. I was going to be a good boy, a big boy. I was brave. Tiny little babies cried about shots. I was a big boy. I was brave. When we got inside the gymnasium, the line was still long. Way up ahead, the line seemed to split into 2 lines. There was a lot of noise in the building. Children were crying. Adults were talking. Some children would start to scream all of a sudden. I began to become afraid. I stood as close to Mommy as I could as the line moved closer and closer to a table. At the table, they talked to each mother about something. Then you went to one of the 2 lines that started just beyond the table. The noise was getting louder. A lot of people in white coats were up ahead. They were kind of around this big door frame without a door. Peeking around my mommy's leg, I could see a boy and his mother walk up to the door frame. All of a sudden, the little boy began screaming as he tried to run away from the people in white coats. His mother and everyone else in the line. As quick as you could blink, the white-coated people grabbed both his arms and pinned them to his sides. Instantly, he fell to the ground, kicking and screaming and squirming and crying, but the white coats had him. They stood him up while keeping both arms pinned to his side. Other white coats began shoving needles into the round parts at the top of his arms, on both sides, at the same time. The little boy screamed and screamed, but they didn't stop. They just kept putting needles into his arms. When they finished, his mother picked him up and carried him off. He just seemed to sob and sob until the screams of another little child in the other line drowned out the boy's cries. "You're not going to be like that, are you? You're going to be brave." "Yes, Mommy, I'm brave. I'm a big boy." I was brave. I was not afraid. I was not like those others. I was a big boy. My turn was next. I hugged Mommy's leg. The little girl in front of me hardly cried when she got her last shots. She was brave. I was brave. Mommy and I started walking towards the doorway without a door. The white coats held up their needles. There were needles on both sides of the doorway. The needles were long. The needles were too long. This was going to really hurt. Without warning, without understanding how it had begun, without willing one conscious action, I realized I was on the floor screaming and kicking and biting and twisting as white-coated arms and hands tried to control me. Several times it seemed that they tried to pick me up, but I managed to fall back on the floor where no one seemed to get a firm hold of me. My shoulders were pinned to the floor with my arms pressed to the sides. I was still able to scream and kick at people with my legs. They stuck the needles into both arms. It seemed to go on forever. Mother didn't say much in the car. I was ashamed. I wanted to be a big boy. I wanted to be brave. It didn't happen. I don't know why. It just didn't happen. After that experience, it seemed harder for me to feel nice about going to a doctor's office. They might give me a shot. You never knew about those things. I did go to see the doctor when Mommy took me. She was always careful to tell me about being brave and all. I got through it. It was difficult for me and Mommy. We got through it. I was mostly brave. Later that fall, I hurt my big front tooth. It kind of turned a dark color. Daddy took me to the dentist to see what might be the matter. At supper that night, he told Mommy and me that I needed to have the tooth pulled. It was dying. When it died, it would make me sick, so it needed to be pulled. A date had been set for the big event. I'd never had a tooth pulled. It might hurt, but Daddy said they would put it to sleep, and then they would pull it without hurting. That was fine with me. Mommy and Daddy told the people who lived next door about it. Mrs. North was really nice. She told me she knew I'd be very brave about it. I would just climb up into that chair, open my mouth and keep it open, and the dentist would just pull that tooth without so much as a tiny little problem. I agreed. This wasn't going to be too bad at all. You just opened your mouth, and pop went the tooth. Mr. North was a streetcar driver. Daddy said we would go to the dentist on Mr. North's streetcar. Mr. North would be the one to drive me to the dentist. This was wonderful. I felt so proud that Mr. North would be the very person to drive me to the dentist's office. It seemed like a lot of the mothers and fathers my parents knew about my tooth. Everywhere I went, there were mommies and daddies telling me how brave I was going to be when I got my tooth pulled. Of course I was brave. I was going to be brave and have my tooth pulled. Daddy and I got on Mr. North's streetcar. There he was sitting in the driver's seat holding the door open for me and Daddy. We sat in the front seat so we could talk with Mr. North. "Little guy, you're going to be so brave. You're going to march right up to that dentist's chair. Sit all still and all while he pulls your tooth, aren't you?" "Yes, sir," I replied, about as proud to be talking to the streetcar driver as a 4-year-old could be. I was certainly a big boy now. "Yes, Bob, we talked about it a lot, haven't we, son?" Beaming with all of this attention, I was at a loss for words. All I could do was grin from ear to ear and nod in agreement. "He is a big boy now. He's going to make me proud. He'll get into that chair and do exactly what the dentist tells him to do. Won't you, son?" Of course I would. There was no question about it. I would walk into that dentist's chair, climb right up in that chair, open my mouth, and do what the dentist told me to do. I was brave. The lady in the front of the dentist's workplace was very happy to see me. Daddy and I waited just a little bit until the dentist called us in. I walked right in. Without anyone telling me to, I just climbed up into the big chair. The dentist put a big bib around my neck and turned his back to me as he talked to Daddy. With his back still to me, he told me to open my mouth really wide. I did just as he said. I opened it as wide as I possibly could. The wide open mouth kind of forced me to tilt my head back as the dentist turned around with a needle in his hand. It was the longest needle I had ever seen. Fear struck my heart. He can't be thinking about putting that big, long needle in my mouth. If he sticks it in my gum, it will go all the way to the back of my head, maybe even be sticking out of the back of my head. This can't be. In total terror, I closed my mouth like a mousetrap being sprung. The needle would have entered my mouth had it not been for my quick thinking. This was horrible. The needle would hurt so bad going through my cheeks, my gums, my tongue, and sticking out of the back of my head. There was no way I was going to endure such pain. It was horrible. Now don't be afraid. It's only going to sting a little," the dentist stated in a falsely calming voice as he waved the enormously long needle in front of my terrified eyes. He didn't know what he was talking about. I knew needles. The longer they were, the farther they went in, and the more they hurt. You couldn't fool me. Daddy started pleading with me to open my mouth. I didn't budge. I had my teeth clamped shut. I couldn't allow the needle to go all the way through my head. After a while, both Daddy and the dentist got a little angry. They threatened me. I could get punished when I got home. I would get horribly sick if that tooth wasn't pulled. Nothing could force me to open my mouth. I could not stand the pain such a giant needle would give me. I just couldn't. It seemed like eternity passed while these two men tried to convince me to open my mouth. Who knows what was said? I certainly didn't. The fear that gripped me blocked out almost all sights and sound, with the exception of the sight of that needle sitting on the shelf behind the dentist. Finally, The dentist said that all he wanted to do was to take a quick look at the tooth. He wasn't going to do anything to me except to put the tongue depressor in my mouth so that he could get a good look at the tooth. Both he and Daddy urged me to just open my mouth so that he could take a look. That was all. Unclamping the locked muscles of my jaw, I slowly opened the mouth just a little bit. The dentist rammed the flat wooden tongue depressor into my mouth and turned it sideways, trying to pry my mouth open and keep it open as the hand behind his back appeared with a needle. Instantly I understood. Horror overwhelmed me. My fear gripped my existence. I slammed down my teeth on the wedged-in tongue depressor, splitting it down the center. It collapsed onto itself. The now 2 pieces of wood firmly clasped between my locked teeth became one. The dentist tried to pull the tongue depressor out of my mouth. He couldn't. I had it locked in. I wasn't about to risk opening my mouth for anything. Daddy and I left his office. The tongue depressor remained between my clenched teeth. I can't remember a big deal being made about my behavior at the dentist's office. I think they must have understood how afraid I was. I just don't know. The family was going to grandmother and grandfather's house in Wisconsin for Christmas. That would be fun. There would be real snow up there. Daddy said that he wanted me to see the dentist that was his dentist when he was a little boy. Daddy said he was a kind man, a gentleman. All he would do was look at my tooth and give his opinion of it. We went to the dentist. He was like grandfather. He was kind. I liked him. He told Daddy and me that the tooth didn't need to be pulled. It would get better with time. It did.